And it is impossible to estimate the human toll when a population faces a decade plus of terror, never knowing where it's coming from, when it's coming next. Plus, not to mention the lives and the talent lost in all these attacks. The U.S. and other nations are fighting back militarily. VOA carried a headline here. This is an article. This comes from November. It says, U.S. military drone strike kills more than 100 Al-Shabab in Somalia. Last year, AFRICOM, which is the U.S. Africa Command, it carried out 30 of these counterattacks on the terrorists there in Somalia. As the world comes together to crush Al-Shabab, we're getting a better understanding of the group and its members. Salem Solomon covers the region for VOA also. She's also a Newsy alum here. I talked with her today about this group's funding and its future over the next decade.
So Al-Shabaab's leadership has been very limited because they have splinter groups, and they have, some of their groups have pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda, and even within that they've splintered to pledge allegiance to ISIS. So it's very fractured, but the leadership in Somalia is very fragile at the moment, and most of the support that's coming to support the government of Somalia at the moment is solely from international community, including the U.S.
So funding is always key, we know, when it comes to terrorism, and we've talked about it, that it could be something like charcoal, it could be getting these, I don't know if you'd call it a remittance or someone giving a payment on these encrypted apps, but also extorting local businesses in a way.
Yeah, or they have punishments that are very archaic. Some of the punishments are flogging in public to scare the population so that they can extort money out of them. They've had beheadings and they've had stoning, mostly actually, for crimes like adultery and things that are very minimal in that way. But there are certain Western benefactors that send through a system called Hawala. Hawala is a system where a lot of the diaspora members send money using Hawala. It's very hard to track. A lot of Western governments have tried to crack down on that to make sure that money that goes into or funneled through the Hawala system does not get into the hands of Al-Shabab.
And part of Al-Shabab's history is that it was a big draw for Westerners and specifically some American communities at one point. And I wonder, what is it that has kept it? It's not as strong at the moment, but you never know what's going to happen in the future. What has made it a draw from the outside in? Young
men who feel isolated in some way when they try to adapt into a new country, or some young men who are born and raised here and they feel like other societal things that make them feel like they're not really assimilating well. Al-Shabaab and ISIS and all these extremist groups have had very penetrated using social media and other propaganda mediums to basically recruit young men. Because they speak the language very well and they can speak to the Western possible recruits that they're looking after, they use them as tools to disseminate information and use them as propaganda tools so that they can lure more men. But on a positive side, from this end of the world, there have been efforts to counter that, aside from drone strikes and training of soldiers on the ground. On this side, there have been extracurricular activities.
You know, when I'm looking at the research and the history of the last 12 years of Al-Shabaab, it kind of was up here, it kind of had a high. Seems to be dipping. Their trajectory's going down in some ways.
The dip that you see is because of the lack of organization that they have. And Somalia, by the way, has one ethnic group, but they have different clan divisions within them. And so that plays into their politics, that bleeds into the way that somebody pledges allegiance within their factions.